from the College by the Lake, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Local, regional, national, and international guests discussing the issues and topics affecting the way you live are on Forum, the North Idaho College Public Forum, with your host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart.
It is a very special privilege to welcome you back to this long series that we're doing entitled Journey Through Time. On this week's program, we're going to continue our visit to France and to Paris. And today we're having conversations with famous Parisians, and the period that we're covering is from 1750 to 1800, as you saw last week with some of our guests on this real exciting series. In this series, we're visiting 5 cities in the world, and those cities are Beijing, Alexandria, Athens, Paris, and New York City. And as I've indicated, we're back in Paris today. I'm very pleased to welcome to the program, going back in history, 2 guests. First of all is a student at North Idaho College, Holly Hetrick, and she is here to portray Queen Marie-Antoinette of France, who lived from 1754 to 1793, and she reigned from 1774 to 1792. In this role-playing that we're doing, we're very pleased to welcome you, Queen Marie-Antoinette of France, to talk about your life and your experiences and what happened during the Revolution in France.
It's good to be here, Tony. Thank you.
And I'm equally pleased to introduce to you Jean Leroy, who is on the faculty at North Idaho College, and he is here portraying Jean-Paul Marat, who was a Swiss-born French revolutionary, I guess is the best way to describe it. And he lived from 1743 until 1793. And we too welcome you to the program and this journey through time, and we're delighted to have you here to answer our questions.
Well, I'm very pleased to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In both cases, I would like to start with some questions about your life and how that evolved into you being remembered in history in the way that you are. May I start with you, Queen Marie-Antoinette? Talk to us a little bit about your relationship with the famous Louis XVI, who was your husband, and I do believe that was an arranged marriage, and just walk us through how that all came about.
It certainly was. I was born in Austria, and at an early age, my mother, who was Maria Theresa, decided that in order to make an alliance between Austria and France much stronger than it already was, she would have an arranged marriage. So she contacted Louis XV and made arrangements with him for the proposed proxy marriage of myself and his son, the Dauphin Louis XVI. It came to be that when I was 15, we were married in France, and we suffered what would be known as a rather estranged marriage to begin with. We weren't terribly close. I was a very young, wayward child who liked to do and say what she pleased, when she pleased, and wasn't terribly interested in the role of a princess. Therefore, Louis and I were not terribly romantic either. Our age difference wasn't so great as to make us incompatible. We just didn't have a whole lot in common. He much more enjoyed his hunting and his locksmithing, and wasn't terribly interested in some of the theatrical things that I like to go and see, and the plays I like to watch, and the music I like to listen to. Later on in life, however, with the birth of our children, we became much closer. And towards the end of our lives, I would have to say that there was a love and a great friendship between the two of us of respect and admiration.
I have one more question before I introduce some questions for our other guests. There was a lot of talk about the activities at Petit Trianon that has made history, and Your Highness, I would ask you to address those if you would.
Well, Le Petit Trianon was probably one of my most wonderful inventions and most dastardly downfalls. The Parisians themselves did not particularly find interest in my activities at Le Petit Trianon, which included gambling, dancing into the wee hours of the night, Fortunately, I was also able to perform in theatrical roles and offer plays there, as well as entertaining a few private guests. The Parisians were not content with the fact that I was spending so much money, so much of their money, on these efforts of gambling and entertaining. However, in the end, they won their way, and we were not allowed to play at Le Petit Trianon any longer.
If you were living in the end of the 20th century, there would be a lot of publicity through television and modern media, and you did escape that during your time.
Fortunately.
May I turn to John Paul, if I may call you that?
Oh, yes, sir.
Would you also bring us up to date about your early life and how it evolved and it affected your moving from where you were born, a Swiss-born individual, to France, and also, as our other guests, how you both became important historical figures in what happened in France, and particularly Paris?
Oh, okay. I left Switzerland when I was approximately 17 years old, and I went to Bordeaux in a certain part of France, and I was a tutor there for a family whose the man was a sugar refiner. But while I was in Bordeaux, I thought it best to go also to the university there, and I started to study the medicine. And after 2 years, I disappeared from Bordeaux and I went to Paris. And when I was in Paris, I continued my studies in medicine, and after which I went to England, and there I became quite famous in my new career in medicine. I wrote books, and I got a degree when I was 32 years old from St. Andrews University in Scotland as a medical doctor. I went back to London. I went to Soho, where the noblesse, the aristocracy, the bourgeoisie, the high bourgeoisie was living, and I became quite famous as a doctor. And I wrote, I was kind of interested in politics, and I also wrote about the state of affairs in England. Then later on, I got a job offer in Paris, and I left for Paris. My job offer was to be the doctor of the guard of the Duke of Artois, the Comte d'Artois, who was the brother of Louis XVI. And I got that commission, and I was their doctor. And though I stayed there for approximately 5 years, I did practice medicine on the outside, and I was known to be a very good doctor in lungs. I was a lung specialist and also eyes specialist. I kind of disappeared from the court and lived in Paris very opulently. I had excellent relations.
I'm going to stop it here at this point and go back to our other guests and come back to you and how, where you've got us now, how that evolves into your development of certain political beliefs and ideas. We'll be back in a moment to talk with you.
Thank you.
Queen Marie-Antoinette, you had a lot of guidance from your mother, Marie Theresa. How did that influence you as you developed your role as the Queen of France?
Well, rather unfortunately, one would assume the guidance that was given wasn't taken into heed until a little too late, I would think. My mother was always very stately, very well educated, and found it very important to be, in a matter of speaking, a diplomat. I, however, through her guidance, did not learn those things at an early enough age and was very, very unruly as a child. As I had spoken earlier, like to do what I want when I wanted. So when I became the Queen of France, my mother continued to send me letters and tell me the type of things that I should be doing. I needed to watch who I spoke to. I needed to become more learned, read more books, study more operas, learn more of the finer things in life, as well as learn to be a little bit more reserved. Fortunately, however, in the end, perhaps a little too late, I did learn some of those lessons, and her guidance was very well taken towards me in the end of my life, when I chose to be what I would consider a stately woman myself, full of respect and love for my country.
May I say, if in due respect, that some of your earlier behavior, though, might have helped lead to the attitudes that grew the revolution?
In my younger days, my freeness with spending, my carefree ways and attitudes, and my lack of knowledge in diplomacy very definitely led to my untimely death later in life and the revolution in itself.
As well as your husband. And,
as well as
and his own behavior. It is often talked about in history about the diamond necklace scandal, which fits into some of the things that you're saying. Would you share that with us?
The diamond necklace scandal was one of great misfortune. Jewelers had made a beautiful diamond necklace for Louis XV to give his mistress, Madame du Barry. However, he had died before he was able to purchase this necklace. So the jewelers, thinking that perhaps Louis XVI would purchase the necklace for myself. At that time, all of Paris and all of France was in such a state about finances that, of course, that would not be allowed. So someone working with the revolution purchased the necklace on my behalf, without my knowledge or consent. When finances and payments weren't made to the jewelers, a huge scandal broke free, which included the jewelers, a very unfortunate priest, who was the middleman, so to speak, in purchasing this necklace, and then a couple of the people that transpired to make this affair be known. The people involved were very much taken care of in their own respect. They were tried and convicted. One was branded as a thief and a traitor on both shoulders in her doings with this particular scandal. All of Paris assumed that we had spent the enormous amount of money required to purchase the diamond necklace in vanity for myself, when it was just a farce on behalf of traitors to the royalty that conspired to do this against us.
To weaken.
To weaken us.
Also, before I go back to other guests, that we've heard so much in history about that you were quoted as saying, "Let them eat cake," that showed your coldness toward the population, but I do believe you think that has been a misquote.
I do, as a matter of fact. I believe that it was basically another form of the revolutionists' propaganda against the Queen, which was very popular at that point in time. It was very well known that Marie-Theresa, the wife of Louis XIV, had uttered the words, "Let them eat cake." And it was used after the diamond scandal as propaganda against the Queen in order to fuel the fire, so to speak. When people on the streets didn't have enough to eat, there wasn't enough bread, and the Queen was supposedly to have said, "Let them eat cake."
Thank you. John, John Paul, let's talk about who you admired in politics. It's kind of unusual for someone with your career to become so involved in politics and the revolution. So I really have a two-part question. Who did you admire and their political views, and what beliefs did you develop from that affected what happened in France?
Okay. I was involved already in politics when I was in England, because there were general elections over there, and I wanted the people to vote for themselves. The two people, writers, philosophers, I admired most were Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who was also a Swiss man, and Montesquieu. They both inspired me, and I followed their steps in that I believed that the government should be for the people, by the people. The king was only the person who would see that the laws enacted by the people be followed. So Jean-Jacques Rousseau and Montesquieu were my idols. Originally, I always thought that King Louis XVI was a great king. I defended him. I thought he would be a good leader, that the monarchy is what France needed. Unfortunately, as the events went, he was influenced by others, including his dear wife, to flee and join the other refugees of the revolution and come back to France and fight the revolutionaries. And this is one of the reasons I voted for he and his wife to have to go to the guillotine, to have their heads rolled. But I saw a lot of misery. I too went into that misery after I was well off in Paris. And I blamed all this on the nobles, the king, not so much him, but Necker and many others. I also was not very well liked by my contemporaries at times because of my views. I believed in having kind of a monarchy, but they wanted to get rid of the monarchy. Eventually did.
Well, you
turn around.
had a conflict in your thinking. It seems to me that you had this relationship with the monarchy, and you said you believed it had an important role to play in France, yet you were very supportive. You were very revolutionary. How did you make those two conflicts meet one another in some kind of conclusion for yourself without having a constant struggle and conflict?
Well, I really thought that the king, King Louis XVI, when he attempted to get the affairs of the state in order, calling des États généraux, which is an assembly of the people representing the noblesse, the aristocracy, the bourgeoisie, and the lower people, like I was, and to see what could be done for the affairs of France, to bring France back on its feet. I really thought that Louis XVI would be able to lead France back. And everything was okay until 1792, when I realized that the king was really betraying everybody because he followed the lead, he followed what his advisors and close friends were telling him to turn around and get rid of the revolution, such as Lafayette.
And so this was the point at which
that was the point where I realized we don't need a king who turns against the people. Let his head roll.
And that's when you made your decision.
Mm-hmm.
Queen Marie-Antoinette, there's a lot of talk about the royal family's escape plans, and as she sat here with someone who had been a friend but also turned, you, I assume at this point, realized that it was over and that you were in great danger.
Our family, the royal family, was told that there was going to be no possible way for us to continue in a monarchy in the way that we were used to doing. So we were told that our lives were in danger, People were marching towards the Varennes, and we needed to escape. We needed a route in which to get us to freedom, and we chose to go to Varennes instead of staying at the Tuileries. What happened, unfortunately, was in my, I shall say, greed. I decided that as the Queen of France, I still must travel in style, and we chose very, very large carriages, very conspicuous carriages, large numbers of them, filled to the rim with all of the ladies in waiting that we needed to continue on with our royal lives the way that we were used to. Unfortunately, this made our travel very slow. We were so slow-moving, in fact, that we were caught before we were allowed to get terribly far. We were made to turn around and travel back at very, very high speeds. And unfortunately, once we were returned to Varennes, we were held captive. We were not allowed to leave again. We were to live in the palace that they had supplied for us without any movement. We could not go outside without escorts. Unfortunately, the revolution had gotten to the point at that stage where we were not in control any longer. Louis was only allowed the power of veto. Other than that, the monarchy was in essence disabled.
We're going to bring it up now to the trial itself, and in the brief time we have, you did not get to continue in that status, but the end was coming.
Exactly. Unfortunately, we were taken to a place where we were held captive in a very, very small, confined area. Louis was the first to be taken away from us. He was taken, tried, and executed. Not long after that, my son was taken away from us, us being his sister and myself. He was taken away and led astray in his thoughts and behavior against his mother, so that when I was taken to trial and put into prison, he was led to believe that it was best to be rid of me. As the time in prison progressed, no trial was brought. It was almost as if the Reform Party didn't want to put me on trial, didn't want to be bothered with the escapade, until it came such a point where they needed a little public outcry, and they needed that public attention once again, and they decided who better than to bring that to them than the beloved and very disloved queen at that point in time, myself, Queen Marie-Antoinette. They brought me to trial. For 2 full days I stood trial, where they accused me of such awful things as incest with my son and thieving from the funds of the public of France to buy the necklace, and further lots of other public problems that they had in my respects to public opinion, as far as the fact that I was not very well liked because of my gambling and earlier nature in life. At that point, they found me guilty. I had approximately 10 hours with which to prepare for my execution. I was taken on a platform carriage with my hands tied behind my back, facing in the opposite direction of where we were traveling, to my execution, where I was very, very quickly placed in the guillotine, where the end of my life was to come at that point, with much public outcry in favor of the execution.
Thank you. Jean Paul, in the time we have left, how did you react to the trial and the death? You died the very same year, I believe, in 1793?
Yes, I died July 13th, the day before the second anniversary or third anniversary of the taking of the Tuileries, the Bastille. I was assassinated. I'm full of holes. I was assassinated by Corday, who was a Girondin emissary, and she found her way into my bathroom and stabbed me. But I voted for the beheading of Louis XVI and his wife, because we did not need them anymore. They were not good for France, and that's the way I felt about it at that time. Louis XVI could veto up to a certain point, but after that, and we decided not to let him, and this is what he did not like. It's too bad that he listened to his counselors and to his wife. Maybe he would have still been there. France would have been a monarchy. I was all for it. For them to get, for France would have been was better without a monarchy at this time.
Even though you turned against the monarchy, did you have any reservations about moving, even though these particular individuals you thought had betrayed France, did you have any hope that someone else could restore the monarchy, or did you want to move, as the revolution did, to a new society?
Oh, I wanted to go to a new society, the society governed by the people, where the people are members of the society, but they are the ones who would enact the laws. They are, but they would have representatives for the sake of order. Representative, we had a Senate. The higher ups would only enact, be sure that the laws enacted would go according to what the people wanted. I believed also that we should have a separation between the executive branch, between the legislative branch, and the judiciary branch.
So you were somewhat influenced by the American Revolution, and the ideas that you're talking about are things that were taking hold in the new country, the United States.
Oh, it was taken hold, but there is a big difference. I was not so much versed in the American Revolution. My ideas came mostly from l'esprit des lois from Montesquieu.
On that, I have to bring our program to conclusion. I want to thank you both, Jean-Paul Marat and Queen Marie-Antoinette, for being with us in Journey Through Time. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed the program as much as we have, and would like to invite you to be with us again next week when we continue this series, A Journey Through Time, and we shall go to New York City. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum was videotaped live from the studios of Instructional Technology on the campus of North Idaho College for viewing at this more appropriate time. We invite you to join us again next week for another all-new edition of the North Idaho College Public Forum on this public television station.